I guess I shouldn't have peeked. I thought I was just being a little insensitive by invading my wife's privacy. I had the best of intentions. At least that's what I told myself when I found her diaries. I thought that if I read just a little bit of them, I would learn something about her secret desire. Something that would allow me to give her the perfect 15th anniversary gift. Well, what I found finally gave me an idea for an anniversary gift. It just took me a while to put it together. It took me quite a while. Almost a full 5 years. I guess I should tell a little bit of the story. Sandy, James, and I were high school friends. We were deeply in love and discovered the joys of sex at an early age. Unfortunately, we were a little slow to learn about contraception, and in the spring of our senior year of high school, Sandy got pregnant. Our parents were not happy with us and took us out of town to be married in a very quiet civil service attended by 4 parents and the 2 of us. Although we had both turned 18, if the school found out, we would have been expelled, so we hid the pregnancy until after high school. Not the most fantastic start to a marriage, but we were excited about the baby. Exactly a baby, yes, with an S. Twins, one of each. Fortunately, Sandy's father was able to get me a job with his construction crew, so I was able to modestly provide for my new wife and children. In time, I became a crew leader, which gave us enough money to afford a nice house in a working-class neighborhood. I worked long hours, and Sandy spent all her time taking care of our children. We had little time for ourselves. Our social life was limited to children's parties, except when our parents took the children out for a night out. We had busy lives, but we maintained a fairly active sex life. I took classes during the winter months and eventually earned an associate's degree in business management. When the kids went to high school, I was promoted to regional manager. We were much better off financially, and my workday became more regular. The only downside was that I had to travel to the main office for meetings with managers. This usually meant I was away for 3 to 4 days every other month. When the kids were older, Sandy decided to get her realtor's license and was hired by Henderson Realty, which was selling several homes we had built. It was a large firm, and Sandy did showings for them. She didn't make a lot of money, but she loved the job, even though she often had to work off the clock. The summer the twins were due to start their freshman year of high school, Sandy and I were approaching our 15th wedding anniversary. I had been saving up money to do something special for her, but had no way of figuring out what to get her. One Saturday afternoon, the kids were gone, and Sandy had a fashion show, and I was home alone. I was already desperate to think of something special, so I decided to go through her closet and look for jewelry in hopes of finding some inspiration. I looked at her outfits and just couldn't imagine what she could possibly need or want. That's when I decided to look in her jewelry box. What she had was pretty modest, and I thought maybe a nice diamond tennis bracelet would do the trick. As I was putting the jewelry box back in the drawer, it kind of stuck, and I realized that there was something in the back of the drawer preventing the box from fully falling into place. I dug around and pulled out 3 small books. Each book was well bound and had a small flap and lock to secure them. I stared at the books, and then it hit me that they must be her diaries. I never knew she kept a diary. I never saw her write in them, and she never talked about them. That should have told me that they were very private and I shouldn't mess with them, but curiosity had always been one of my weaknesses. Besides, maybe this will give me a great idea for her gift. Yes. That was exactly my reasoning when I opened her personal diaries and started reading. It turned out that she had started keeping them when the kids were about 2 years old, and most of the first 2 books were simply memories of important childhood events, and nothing more. The 3rd book was more recent, and told of her attempts to pass the realtor's exam and get a job with Henderson. It went on to talk about how nervous she was to do her first showing and how grateful she was to Brad Henderson, the owner's son, who helped her write her first contract and get her first deal done. Apparently, she worked a lot with Brad because the next few pages of entries were filled with her working with him. One entry made me stop. Sandy described young Mr. Henderson in detail. I learned from her notes that he was 24 years old, which is almost 10 years younger than me, tall and very well built, with adorable deep blue eyes and a smile that could melt a girl's panties. What the fuck? I quickly read the book further and my world began to crumble. Checking the dates of her entries, I realized that it took Brad about 6 months to get her into bed, and they slept together several times over the next year. No doubt their affair would have continued beyond that, but Brad's grandfather, who owned several resorts on the West Coast, convinced Brad to move west and become his understudy. In Sandy's notes over the past year, she often lamented the loss of her delightful guilty pleasure. Well, this revelation certainly put an end to any plans to make our 15th anniversary special. She received a cheap bouquet of flowers, and that was it. No card, no dinner, no sex. Reading her diary made it clear that she was in love with Brad and had no qualms about cheating on me. I had no doubt that she would still be happily sleeping with that jerk if he hadn't left town. Her cavalier attitude toward cheating made me wonder if she was now looking for a stud to replace Brad. I focused on supporting my children and let my feelings for the only girl I loved slowly die. My plan was to stay married to this cheating bitch until the kids left for college. We live in a no-fault state, so there was little I could do to protect myself from the courts. I blew most of the money we had saved into an account to pay for the kids' tuition, knowing that I would be responsible for it anyway. I also began slowly collecting cash and rare coins and storing them in a safe in a rented fireproof climate-controlled storage unit in my brother's name. Periodically, I looked in her diaries to see if she had found a new boy toy, but there was never any mention of new, delightful pleasures. She did, however, describe in great detail her lust-filled daydreams about several young men she had met, but she never seemed to act on those feelings. Most of her entries were simply descriptions of her work and childhood adventures. When the children were getting ready to graduate, she wrote about hoping to travel with me and finally enjoy life with her wonderful, attentive, loving husband. She actually wrote those words. I almost threw up. The day came when we picked the kids up from school and came home as official empty nesters. It had been a difficult few years of pretending to care for Sandy. I shed quite a few tears in the beginning, but gradually hardened. Sure, I continued to have fun with the bitch, but it was sex specifically, not love. Although our sex life had slowed to a trickle, Sandy was always receptive and sometimes initiated. Too bad. I really enjoyed having sex with her. At that point, I didn't care what she liked. I was doing it for my own pleasure, not hers. Sandy's big SUV was packed to the brim with a ton of junk on the roof. It was about a 2-hour drive to the kids' campus, so we chatted while I got there. We dropped the kids off, got them settled into their dorms, and got back in the SUV to drive home. James, can you believe our little ones are going off to college? My God, it seems like yesterday I was changing their diapers. Yeah, those first years flew by like a blink of an eye. It's great to see them excited for the next phase of their lives. Oh, James, I'm excited to start this next phase in our lives, too. Just think how much time we'll have to ourselves. I want to do some traveling and really enjoy each other. Well, Sandy, I'm very, very excited to start this new chapter in life. I look forward to traveling with my beautiful companion to exotic places. Sandy grinned, leaned over and kissed me on the cheek, and then leaned back in her chair and dozed off. Sandy woke up when I pulled into our garage. Oh my gosh, I must have missed you. I can't believe we're home. Yes, you are home, I said as I got out of the car, opening the back hatch and pulling out my 2 suitcases. Sandy frowned and said, Oh crap, did they forget any of their stuff? At that moment, a small SUV pulled into our driveway, out of which an attractive young woman got out and waved at me, opening the rear hatch of her car. No, those are my bags, said I, picking up the bags and carrying them to the other vehicle. I set the bags down and kissed the girl while Sandy stood looking at us. Sandy, I'm sure you remember Caroline from my office. She came to pick me up. We'll be back in about 3 weeks. 3 weeks? James, what the hell are you talking about? You never said anything about any business trips. How can you just jump on me like that? Caroline walked over to Sandy and handed her a large envelope. I said, "These are the divorce papers. I suggest you get a lawyer to review them. I think I was fair, but you should still get a lawyer." Divorce? What the hell do you mean by divorce? James, what does all this mean? Is this some kind of sick joke? It's not a joke. Caroline and I are going on a 2-week cruise and staying at a very romantic island resort for a few weeks. What the fuck? Are you out of your fucking mind? We're married. You can't run off with that whore. She's not a whore. In fact, it took me years to convince her to just let me kiss her, but she was worth the wait. Now we have to go. We have a plane to catch. While we were gone, the movers came and moved all my stuff over to Caroline's place. I took half of our cash, and my lawyer will answer any questions you have. James, please, how can you do this? How can you just leave me? We've been together for almost 20 years. Doesn't that mean anything to you? She sobbed, tears streaming down her face. Yes, Sandy, it does. I have loved you with all my heart for 15 years. I gave you everything I could give you, but it wasn't enough for you. You just had to have your delicious, guilty pleasures. Recognition flashed across her face, and her hand came up to her mouth. My diaries! You've read my diaries! Oh my God, James, please! It was a mistake. Please, baby! Don't do this! Please, I love you! Please, James! I turned to Caroline and kissed her sweet lips, and then looked at my soon-to-be ex-wife again. You've had your delightful, guilty pleasures. Now it's time for me to have a few of my own. Epilogue. Sandy tried to fight the divorce and even denied having an affair with Brad, telling everyone I was just crazy and ran off with some whore. Luckily, I took the journal with her handwritten confessions, and when I sent the pictures to the kids, they realized she was lying. Despite her attempts to delay the divorce, it eventually went through and cost me a tidy sum. By then, I was living with Caroline, and she was trying her best to keep my spirits up by shaking my brains out. Sandy asked, and I agreed to one last conversation when the final divorce papers were signed. She started to apologize to me, but I raised my hand to stop her. Then I asked her the only question I wanted an answer to was, why? James, I did it for purely selfish reasons. I was flattered that some handsome young guy wanted me, and I was sure you would never find out about it. I never had any feelings for Brad, except lust. It was just forbidden fruit. He was only the second man in my life. The affair was so naughty and so exciting. I was so caught up in my own pleasures that I didn't even think about getting caught and hurting you. I am so ashamed of what I did and so devastated at what it cost me. I hope someday you can forgive me. Sandy, you gave me 15 good years and 2 wonderful children. For that I will always love you. The last few years of our marriage were the worst years of my life, and for that I will always hate you. I suppose in time I will deal with this conflict and maybe be able to forgive you. But don't hold your breath. I stood up and walked out of the conference room. I could hear Sandy sobbing as I left. By the time the kids were out of school, I had dealt with the pain of her betrayal, mostly through the efforts of my fiancée, Caroline. We had a big party for the kids, and Sandy showed up with her new boyfriend. He seemed like a nice guy, and I told Sandy I was glad to see her move on with her life. Then I hugged her and told her I forgave her. She burst into tears and rushed to the bathroom. Caroline, who had heard everything, hugged me and said, "That was a good act on your part, but don't even think about giving her any more pleasures." I laughed and squeezed my fiancé. "Don't worry, beautiful. Your pleasures are the only ones I'm interested in.